And it's just taken time to, go through some trials and errors to figure out, what makes me feel more aligned, and then realize that it's not the end of the world if you don't have it all figured out, because life can still be fun, even if you're just kind of flailing through too.
Are we having fun? Hell yeah.
I'm Steph.
And I'm Kayla, and we're two best friends coping with life the only way we know how, one adventure and a cocktail at a time.
Yeah. Excitement is real.
Juice cleanse, juice cleanse, juice cleanse. Oh my gosh, if you say it 3 times, a juice will appear. Like Beetlejuice, get it? Beetlejuice. All right. We did not pick a cocktail this week because Stephanie is on a juice cleanse, so she can't be getting crunk, all right? You know what I'm saying? And honestly, I was feeling the same way. Sometimes you just go a little overboard and you gotta reset. So cut us a break, all right? But also, what about an alcoholic juice? Like, why isn't that a thing? Why don't they serve juice cleanse type cocktails at a bar? I don't know. Did I just start a new thing? All right, whatever. This week, we have, I think, our very first podcasting group. So it's a very different dynamic when we get to bring on people that are like us. And we're really excited to have the cast of Successful, the podcast on. We have Natalie Burke, who is a corporate consultant and yoga teacher in Dallas, Texas. And she's with her partner and her pets. We can relate. She loves rock climbing, same, sewing, or is in her garden. Oh my gosh. Like, it's like the best of both worlds between me and Stephanie.
Exactly.
And then Carla Parra is a Mexican-American ex-corporate consultant turned writer and life and career coach for women. Yes, I love how you just took your career and went your own direction with it. That's what we're all about here. And we can't wait to get into it. And she explores everywhere in a tiny camper with her husband and her 2 dogs.
Goals.
I mean, definitely goals. So,
I need to hear about that. I'm trying to do
many stories.
So we want to welcome Natalie and Carla to the show. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, ladies.
Such a pleasure to be on.
So nice to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting us. This is such an honor.
It's our inaugural podcaster to podcaster podcast episode.
Yeah. How many times can we say podcast?
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny that you guys are in Texas, because I was looking at our insights the other day or yesterday, and we have like a following in Texas. So it could be you. I don't know. But it's just interesting because Stephanie's in Florida. I'm in Minnesota. This is a very like remote travel type podcast, but we haven't been to Texas together. So we're wondering where those people are coming from. And it's so cool though.
We have people probably us.
And there's so many of us too.
And Texas is big.
We're huge. Yeah.
Everything's bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about your podcast. We want to hear it from your perspective, because that way we can, get our audience involved with more podcasting opportunities.
Yeah. So our podcast is called Successful, and it's really connected to the premise that as women, we grow up with an idea of what success should mean. And the more women that we talk to, the more we kind of test this as being true that there's this path that many of us are taught that we need to follow. For me, everybody's different, but for me, it was very much go to college and then work really, really hard. And then when you retire, then you can enjoy life. And that served me for a while, but there came a point in my life where I realized I don't want to wait until I retire to live and to enjoy my life and wake up happy and excited about what I'm doing. And so I've been very intentional in my life, and I know Natalie has been too, and really thinking about what is my definition of success, according to my terms, and then how do I pursue that? So we want to bring the stories of more women that are doing that, of redefining what success means to them and going after that definition on their own terms.
Yes. And that plays into the whole like traveling. And so you're usually podcasting on the road. Is that right? Yes. And then you kind of like hold the fort down in Texas.
Yeah. And she has the best acoustics in her camper. I am so jealous.
Our little camper has this, it's really weird. It's a carpet wall and it's meant to help with temperature. It's meant to help with temperature regulation and sound to, muffle sound. But it so happens that it works out great.
It's like her own little recording room.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Oh, yes.
So whenever we record, I just kick my husband out. I'm like, you go out to the car, take the dogs on a walk. I record it. Yeah.
Perfect. So checking that off the list, I'm going to buy a camper right now and turning it into my VO studio.
Yeah, it serves both purposes. You can have adventures, you can have a podcast, you can do it all. In a camper.
I love that. So in terms of coaching, consulting, what do you kind of like do to coach people into living the life they want?
Yeah. Well, consulting, which is what Natalie does and what I did for many years, it's really about telling people what to do.
It is.
Right? Solving problems by giving them the formula for how to fix problems. As a coach, I coach really with the belief that people already have the answers within them based on their experiences, based on their own inner knowledge. And my job as a coach is to help them find those answers within themselves by asking the right questions, by getting really curious, by holding up a mirror to help my clients see what they're not seeing. And so that's really how coaching is very different from consulting or from like even managing or mentoring, which is very much about telling people what to do. Here, it's really creating a container, a safe space for exploration and to just kind of get messy and muddy with life's problems or life's dreams, right? And be able to always start with a goal, muddle through things, and always end with forward movement. And coaching is different from therapy in that sense, and that therapy is very past focused, which is very important too. But coaching is very forward looking. It's very much about momentum, very much about taking action, but not just taking action like with a let's make a plan kind of approach. Rather, it's what are the inner blocks that are preventing you from taking action on the things that you want. So for example, when I was way before I became a coach before I launched my business and left my consulting career, there was a lot of fear there, right? Like a lot of, first of all, I didn't even have clarity. Like I knew I wanted to do something else, but I didn't even know what that meant. And so I wish that at the time I'd had a coach to help me gain clarity. And then once I had clarity, to help me gain self-belief and to gain courage to take the steps that felt in line with myself and in line with my values and what's important to me. And so that's really what a coach does. It's a partner. It's a partnership to help you get clarity on what's really important to you and then work on the inner blocks. Because so many of our blocks are inner. We tend to blame things like I don't have time or I don't have money, which are all external blocks. But really the internal ones are the biggest ones that we need to tackle. And so a coach can really help you with that and then start to take that forward movement and build some momentum towards your goals and building the life that you want. So that's what I do now. And interestingly, a lot of my clients, well, I really love working with women, career-focused women. But a lot of them do tend to come from the consulting world. That's not the only type of woman that I coach, but it's a world that I'm so familiar with, or from corporate, right? It's a world that I'm so intimately familiar with all the lingo and the hierarchies and priorities and things like that. So it's been a very natural fit for me to work with those women.
So you coach the consultants, and then the consultants tell everybody what to do.
So really, I'm the one that's like behind the scenes. She's changing the world.
Yeah.
She's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. Look, she's even wearing green. It all works.
Oh, wow.
If you have, if you're working with a woman that isn't in the consulting industry, how do you bridge that gap? Like if you have no idea of the industry that they're in, how do you help them with their goals like that?
So it's not necessary as a coach to know the industry. A lot of people think, I mean, there is a benefit. Like some of my clients do come and they say, I chose you as my coach because I know you understand my world. And I get that there is a benefit to that. But as a coach, we're not trained to be coaches on a particular industry or even a particular area of life, right? There are coaches that are relationship coaches or coaches like marriage coaches or career or whatever, sales, whatever different aspect. But that's something that coaches that are certified choose for themselves afterwards because of maybe where they come from. But the training that we go through is to be able to coach everybody, men, women, old, young. Like really it's about, because as humans, we all have shared inner blocks, right? And it doesn't matter what the industry is. It's really about the human essence that we learn to coach. So yeah, it's a great question, but industry is not part of that equation. However, you can specialize in that if that's something that you want. So for example, I'm specialized in transitions. So I always worked in the corporate space in change management, helping companies transition through change. So it was a very natural fit. And because I have gone through a lot of change too, I love change, to focus on transitions. And so I went through extra training to understand how I could coach people on navigating through changes in their own lives. Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
So it's
I've
more
been
of like a
through,
holistic
like a training session of hers before, and it's very fun. It's very difficult because it's not just, sitting there telling about, what you did that day and why you're unhappy. She asks you very pointed questions and you really have to dig deep to answer them. So it's, questioning your beliefs and your values and digging into, the why behind your actions and why you believe something. So
yeah, it's bringing more conscious awareness to the way that we live our life, which we don't always do, right? Because we're busy and we're distracted.
Right.
Yeah. So that coaching space is really about consciousness.
And it forces you to be honest with yourself, which is hard to do sometimes. Because you have to look in and see where you need to work. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right.
So for somebody who is, let's say, transitioning from a corporate role to maybe like a job that more suits their passions, is there like a specific kind of person that you should look for first? Like, should you go to coaching first? Should you go to therapy first? Should you go to consulting if it's not like corporate based? Like, or is it like you kind of could benefit from having all of those different things at once?
I like your third option the most, because I think that having a team around you is the best if you can. But I think it depends on just where you are in that journey. So if, for example, you are very stuck, you feel very, very stuck in where you are, and it has to do with trauma, for example, or like really deep-seated beliefs that come from your childhood. I think therapy is more well suited at that particular point, because therapy really digs into those past held or beliefs or assumptions that we make that are based on our childhood, or just our past life in general. And so therapy would be really good for that. Coaching doesn't really dig into the past as much. It's someone that's more ready to start to take action. Not to say that we don't go into the past a little bit, but it's really somebody that's ready to move forward. So that's when a coach would come into play. I'd say a consultant would be more if you have a particular skill set that you're trying to develop, or I don't know if consulting, I think it would be more like a teacher of some sort that I would go to gain skills and to maybe a mentor, somebody that I could be a shadow or shadow that person and learn about their career path. Natalie and I have been talking a lot about that today, like the importance of mentorship, which is a different role from a coach, because a mentor will say, my path has been this, you might benefit from also following this path. A coach will never say that, because a coach knows that the shoes that you have walked in will never be the same shoes that I have walked in. Yeah. So I think that all of those roles do have an important place in that journey of making a change. But I think it's important to see, like, where are you in that journey? Are you still very stuck? Are you ready to move forward? Are you looking to gain a particular skill set? Are you just looking for somebody to learn from it's been on the path that you're going to go on? In that case, a mentor would be better. So I think it's important to see where in the stage you are. But if you can have the whole team, even better.
Yeah, the whole team. And this is a concept that one of our guests told us, one of our mutual friends. She said that you should be trying to collect your own board of directors. So these people in your life who are supporting you in different ways. So, a friend who can listen to you, gripe about your day, a therapist who can help you dig into the trauma, a coach who can push you forward, maybe a financial advisor who can help you plan for your big dreams, having these people around you who can support you and guide you as you work towards building your dream life.
Yeah.
And over time, I think we collect these people and we have a few in our lives, but if you consciously start to map out what you want your life to look at, you can bring those type of people in whose life you either want to emulate because, this is the person I want to be like, or, whatever it is, just having those people in your life that you can either shadow or be educated by. I think it's an important thing to have.
Yeah.
I love how you called it a board of directors, because that really puts your life into you're the CEO of your own.
You are.
Of your own
company. You're the brand. Yeah.
I think though, our podcast definitely has a lot of people that are, I wouldn't say just like us, because maybe we're in a different place now, but we were definitely lost when we got out of college. And that was kind of the whole idea behind us starting this, was that we don't really know anything about life in general, but we kind of know what we want. So this was our exploration. This is where we started.
This is going to guide us one way or the other.
Yeah. We tend to get people that are still trying to find themselves as well, that could benefit from people like you. And, especially we just had a mom, she's not just a mom, but we had a nurse on the show. But it turned out that, the response was all these new moms that just got all this value out of her, giving her insight. Like you said, nobody has the same path. It might be with work, it might be with your personal life, but everybody has their own path, but they can hopefully get inspired by the people we bring on and try to find their own way. So I really appreciate you giving us the insight into what you do, because I feel like it's becoming more popular to have coaches around and all of these new mentors, things like that. But I feel like it's still not mainstream. I don't know if that's the right word for it.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot more people could benefit from it that just have no idea what you guys are doing in your daily lives.
I completely agree. I mean, when I was in my 20s, it didn't even cross my mind to look for a coach. I didn't even know what that was. And I think that there is I think being a coach, that there's a little bit of a stigma sometimes around coaching, being this frou-frou thing, a Tony Robbins kind of thing. And which
they look at one guy.
Yeah. But I think that those personalities have given coaching a little bit of, bad taste for some people, of thinking oh my gosh, how I'm going to pay this amount of money for somebody to just ask me questions. That's ridiculous. Or somebody that's too ooh, rah, rah.
Yeah.
And when I went into the coaching industry, I felt a little bit of that, I don't want to be one of those, I don't want to be Like, I want to be me. I want to be authentic. And for me, it was important to really learn what it means to coach and get certified. And there's a lot of coaches out there that aren't certified that are very good. And there's also a lot of coaches out there that are certified that aren't very good. So I think I've just learned, like, for me personally, it is important to educate myself with the tools to be able to help people in a really impactful, authentic way. But I think there's a coach for everybody out there. Yeah. But one thing that I wanted to say from something that you mentioned about, like, when you get out of college, because Natalie and I do talk a lot about that. For me, it was a little longer ago than for Natalie when I graduated from college. But it is a time where you're just like a little lost for sure. And even though for me, I had a job already waiting for me out of college, which definitely helped with having that clarity, I still had no idea what the heck I was doing with my life financially, career-wise. I was just kind of like, oh, well, this stuck to the wall. This spaghetti stuck. I'll go there,
Yeah.
And I think I've realized now in my 30s that at that point, I felt like I needed this, like, grand plan for my life. Like, I need to have it figured out. And why don't I have it figured out? And it just felt very overwhelming and very much like I wasn't living my life because I didn't have this plan figured out. And I realize now in my mid-30s that life is not meant to be this one grand plan. Rather, I almost think of it like a book with a lot of different chapters. Like, life is the book, and we just have a lot of chapters that we get to live out. And so I'm so glad that in my 20s, I had the chapter where I had no idea what the heck I was doing, because that was so necessary for me to get to the next chapter, which then taught me different things, and the next one. And I will also say that in my 30s, I don't always know what the heck I'm doing. So it's not like you're like this magical age where you got it all figured out. I don't think that's true. But I think that's a good thing, right? Because it means that you're reinventing yourself, and it means that you're growing. Because when we stop learning, we stop growing. And so
exactly.
You got to just look at it really as a set of chapters and what a fun way to look at it, I think.
I think it takes age, though, to have that perspective.
For sure.
When you come out of these transition points, so you feel like you're at the top of the mountain after you get out of school, right? Like, I've graduated, I did the thing, maybe you have a job lined up, you just feel on top of the world. You enter the real world and you realize, okay, where are those milestones? What's the next milestone? To get married? Like, what?
Right.
What's the next thing that I need to do? And I just remember being so stressed out all the time. I got depressed. I was like, what am I doing with my life? I should be loving it. I've got this great job. I'm making money. I did not know how to save money, which was a problem that I figured out later. It all comes with time. But I was just confused and depressed. And I was like, I shouldn't feel this way, because basically I have a life that people would just die to have. Basically, I have this great life, but it was something that was missing there. I think there were a few things: lack of perspective, because I thought I should have it all figured out, like Carla said. And then the second thing is not being aligned with what I was doing, but not realizing that was what was driving me to not feel great about life. And it's just taken time to, go through some trials and errors to figure out, what makes me feel more aligned, and then realize that it's not the end of the world if you don't have it all figured out, because life can still be fun, even if you're just kind of flailing through too.
And I think a big thing also, or at least for me, is you have to stop comparing your journey to other people's journeys. Because I think that's a big one that makes you not aligned, because you see, oh, this person already got married. They already did this. They're living here. Why aren't I doing that? It kind of makes you look internally and think that your life isn't as great because of what other people are doing.
Absolutely.
So you just have to kind of focus on your own path and,
Yeah. And it's so hard in this world because we have access to everybody's stories, or what everybody projects their stories to be.
Exactly.
Right? Like our parents didn't have that.
Right. So they could only be focused about them. Right.
Yeah. We're confronted all the time with what other people are doing. Yeah. And it really can make us feel unsatisfied. But the amount of people that we've talked to who feel the same way, everybody's feeling the same, imposter syndrome.
Right. Once you get past the facade of Instagram and social media. Yeah.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah. And it's hard to have that perspective though.
Yeah.
Even now.
Yeah.
I mean, I know logically I shouldn't compare myself to others.
It still happens.
Like, with a podcast, right? Natural. Like, you look at other podcasters and you're like, oh my gosh, they have thousands of followers, whatever.
Yeah.
But you have to have perspective.
Mhm.
We just launched our podcast 2 months ago. Like,
Yeah.
Yay!
expect, you can't compare yourself. I
Right.
heard a great quote. I'm not going to try to say the quote, but it was something about like, you can't compare yourself to George Lucas, with Star Wars. You can't like
Right.
try to write the next Star Wars and be like, oh my gosh, why isn't my work like Star Wars? You need to start where he started. Like,
Yes.
what were his earlier works?
Yeah.
Like level set.
When
Mhm.
nobody was listening or reading,
Exactly.
what
Yes.
he did. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's us right now.
Yeah.
Right now.
We're starting our George Lucas period of time right now.
But that is that's an important thing to say though, because it's like, we do that all the time as well. We can't help it, but we think of what we want and we're like, okay, it's not going to happen right away, but we can still dream big. And then we got to just
Mhm.
do the little things now. And then
exactly.
eventually it might not look exactly how we thought it was going to look, but it'll lead somewhere.
Mhm.
Completely.
Yeah. And I think something that's really interesting. So just a background on us. So we met in the consulting world at the same company.
Mm-hmm.
I still work there. And most of the time that I've worked at this company, I've felt misaligned. And only in the last few years have I started to take my values and what I really want to focus my life on. So, for example, sustainability is a huge value of mine, being kind to the planet.
Yeah.
I have started to shift my career in that direction, and consulting has been really wonderful because it allows you that flexibility. It took me years to get here, but I was able to kind of steer my career in the direction that aligned with my values, and taking those baby steps, like you said, just one step at a time, getting to know the right people, educating yourself, and just getting in line with my values has allowed me to then jump into that career.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much more satisfying when you're working for something that you really believe in. And it's made it a lot easier to actually go to work every day. It took a long time to get here, but it just goes to show me like these little steps, like starting a podcast to share stories with other women, like these little things start to set you up for the life that you want.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing of you saying it took me a long time to get here. I don't think it has to take a long time.
Doesn't have to
get there. And I think kind of goes back to how I wish I'd had a coach in my 20s to help me learn these things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hindsight is 2020 always, right? But really, I think at all points, at all stages in our lives, we should know our values. This is something that has been very top of mind for me. It's what guided me to become a full-time RVer and hit the road and live in nature. It's what guided me to launch my business. It's knowing what are the key principles that I want to live my life, but not like all 15 of them. No, like what are the 3 to 5 things that I would be willing to do anything to defend and to honor in my life? For example, family. Family is a really common one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do anything to defend your family. But sometimes to defend and honor time with your family, but sometimes when we're feeling misaligned and guilt and things like that, and anxiety, a lot of times it's because we don't spend enough time with our family and we feel like we're not honoring that particular value. So that's just an example. But another value for me, for example, was freedom. Freedom is hugely important to me. And so when I was in corporate, to have somebody else own my time and to be living in an apartment where I felt like that was all there was, which it was a great apartment, but I felt constrained, I felt limited. And so when I realized like freedom is my number 2 value, like it's really high up there. And yet my life is not reflecting that particular one, or adventure, for example. And so it would have been nice to have a little more of that clarity in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm glad. I mean, I probably was able to define my values much more easily because of all my experiences. So nothing is ever wasted. But if out of college, you can really spend some time thinking about what are the 3 to 5 things that are so in alignment with me. Like when things are really good, it's because these things are being honored. And when things are not so good, it's because I'm not honoring these different values. That can change so much. That can change the decisions that you make about what job to take or not to take, or where to live, or who to be in partnership with.
So
Powerful.
when you realize that you're misaligned, how do you stay like focused on, like, obviously you can't just quit your job, right? You can't just be like, I'm done with this. And like, maybe it was,
don't stop.
Yeah. Maybe it was
So true.
easier in college, like, this this major is not for me. I'm going to switch it. Yeah. But like, you can't do that when you're in your late 20s. So like, how do you stay kind of centered in those instances until you can really transition somewhere else?
I think to a certain extent, you can be doing certain things, not necessarily drop your job. And because, of course, you need some stability if that's a value that's important to you. But you can be doing little things. Like, for example, to Natalie's point, like the consulting field, for example, tends to be an area that's very diverse. And so I think it's important to not be so like have these blindfolds of being like, this is the only thing there is for me. Yeah. No, like maybe within my own company, there are other people that I can talk to that are doing something else that seems kind of interesting. Maybe I'll have a coffee with that person, or maybe I'll ask if I can just kind of, sit in on one of their meetings or something to kind of just see if that's something that speaks to me. So I think that there are certain little things that you can do in your current environment just to explore. I think really, I love the word like experimentation, and it doesn't have to be changing your job completely. It can be these little different steps that you take just to start to open up your perspective and open up those blinders a little bit. So it can be really as small as doing that, or it can be bigger, right? It can be taking a couple of weeks off and going and doing like some sort of activity a retreat or something that takes you really that allows you to get perspective. Because sometimes when we are in the trenches of our job, it's really hard to have perspective. I've had clients that have had to take leaves of absence from their job to get that perspective, or take at least 2 weeks of vacation to be able to be like, oh my gosh, I am not my job. I thought I was, but my job doesn't find me. Oh my goodness,
or it doesn't serve me anymore.
Yeah. So whatever you can do to just step away for a little bit and spend time, not, if your intention is really to discover, use that time to discover, journal, talk to people, write, really spend time by yourself, listening to yourself, I think is really important. It's one of the biggest gifts that you can give yourself.
Absolutely. And I think one of the hardest things, so your question was coming from the perspective, I think, of somebody who already knows kind of what they want to do. Right. And that's oftentimes the hardest thing to do is define, and have clarity on what do I want to be doing? What does my ideal life look like? Right. So that's what Carla is kind of digging into, is that discovery portion that has to happen first. Yeah. And sometimes it just takes some life experience to be able to say, these are the things I don't want to do. Right. Yeah. You do the things that you're like, F this. So this is,
I know what I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Never want to do
Let's
that
hone
again.
in on what I do want to do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's so interesting that you say that, because that's so true. Like, my perspective is not of somebody who just finished college, but I do remember not even knowing where I was going to go with that. So that is so interesting. Like even the experience I've had in I don't even know how many years it's been, 5 years, has changed the way even I look at things. So I like that you brought that up, because it could be different for somebody else. And that is the hardest spot, is when you don't know what you want. Yeah.
And I want to say to those people who don't know, I mean, it can feel so isolating and so really depressing. I mean, that's what I experienced, was just like, you feel like you don't know where to go. You don't know where to turn. Nothing feels like it's for you. It feels very, it's very difficult. But my advice is to just start somewhere. So start at that job that maybe is just okay. Learn what you can, and then figure it out from there, right? Because you've got to start somewhere. Right. And no matter what experience you have, like Carla said, your time isn't wasted. I look back on some of the things that I've done where I worked with terrible people who were verbally abusive, but I learned how to not manage people. Don't manage people like that.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think to add to that, the other thing that's really popping in my mind is the importance about talking about that.
Totally.
Because so often, especially in my 20s, I used to think like, I must be the only one, like to your point, it feels really lonely. Like I must be the only one that really hates my job. Yeah. Because everybody shows up and kills it.
Right.
And I think I'm killing it, but I'm miserable killing it. Like, do
Yeah.
other people feel this like pit in their stomach every time they stand up to present?
And what
Are
if
other
they
people,
do
like,
though? No, I'm
sweating?
kidding.
I think that's the
I think some
reality,
do.
though.
I think
I think that a
they're
lot
just
of
good at
people
hiding it.
are miserable and anxious in silence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the older I became and the more that I started to be more comfortable in talking about, like, oh, you know, this is really hard. The more especially other women opened up and said, yeah, it is really hard and it has not been easy for me. And they share their story.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important to just remember that you're definitely not alone,
Definitely not.
and to give other people the opportunity to share by also sharing your own story
Mhm.
and being vulnerable about it, which can be hard.
Definitely.
For sure.
Yeah.
And is that what you guys are trying to come across with your podcast? Like, I know that you have different guests with different, walks of life. So are you really trying to show, everybody's in a different spot and this is how they got to where they are, basically?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's been like intentional and unintentional.
Mhm.
Like, intentionally, we want to bring the real stories of real women who are redefining and pursuing success on their own terms. But I think the more we're realizing unintentionally is how shared these stories are. These stories of imposter syndrome, these stories of self-doubt, these stories of feeling like I'm not good enough, of lacking self-belief. And it's just amazing to see, like, wow, we're not talking about these things very much in,
Right.
in the corporate world. I think a little bit more now, probably than
Mhm.
when I was in my 20s, because mental health is becoming more
Yeah.
of it's less of a taboo topic.
Right.
Right.
Especially
But I
on
think there's
social
a lot of
media. People are like
And so, yeah.
so much more open now about that kind of stuff. And maybe it's because you get attracted to what you want to see on social media, but
Right.
but also a lot of people are opening up about it, which is
I
amazing.
think so.
Yeah. And sharing the stories of people, because you see these people, and a lot of time we see them at their most successful, right? So you listen to How I Built This by Guy Raz, that amazing podcast
Such a
where he
great podcast.
interviews entrepreneurs who have found success, right?
Right.
And before, he started interviewing these people, you'll just see this entrepreneur who's making, millions of dollars per year, and it only took them 2 years to do it. You're like,
Right.
dang.
But
how
where
did they
was he
get
for
there?
the 10 years before that? That's what I think of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we love to dig into, like he does really, but for women specifically, what was your path? And there's a lot of trials along the way. So we dig into all of their vulnerabilities. And then one of the big themes that we're seeing, especially with the women who are entrepreneurs and who have started their own businesses, are that they're scared, right? So there's this level of fear and risk aversion, but they get to a point where they cannot take it anymore. So there's always that push, right?
Yes,
So they're coming into work crying every day. They just can't get out of bed because they just don't want to go.
Sometimes
Some
me.
get fired,
Yeah.
right? So there's
Yeah.
this push and they're scared to death, but they do it anyway. And they start their own business anyway.
That is hands down. I mean, probably Stephanie, I don't want to speak for her, but definitely me and me pushing her on this whole journey, because it's definitely getting to that point even.
Sometimes that push, needs to be internal. And sometimes for some people, it needs to be like that external, like, okay, well, now I have no choice. But ideally, it's ideal if it doesn't get to that point. If you can take more ownership and either one works, but if it feels better if you feel more like, I made this decision, this was on my own terms, and this is because I'm honoring myself, versus I have no choice, now I must go. I mean, the language there is just so different.
Yeah. There's more growth too if you do it yourself versus like, oh, I got fired, now I have to do it.
Yeah.
Did you really do it, or was it,
Right.
I think there's merit to both, really.
For sure, yeah.
Because, even if you do get fired, you have that choice, right? You can either find a similar job or, you can go do something that's, not
That's
your
true.
own. If that's your path, and that's totally fine. But, we've talked to people who use that as their discovery period.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, shoot, I got fired at the beginning of a pandemic. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And you use that time to introspect so that they could then figure out what they wanted to do, whether what that was their own job that they created or going into something different.
Where do you guys see your podcast, your professional lives, everything, where do you see it going in the next, months, years? What are your
It's funny
goals?
that you asked that, because we spent the whole day together. Well, we don't get to see each other in person very often since she's on the road.
Right.
So she's in town, which we're really lucky. But we spent the whole day basically ideating around, what do we want this to be, right? What do we want the podcast to be? What do we want to be, our goal with not only the podcast, but anything that supports it. So we have this, I don't know what you would call it, this
Vision.
mission statement, vision. And we want to make it bigger.
Mm-hmm.
We do. We have a lot of dreams for how to help women specifically to thrive, and not feel like they're stuck.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of things we could do there.
Yeah. I think the podcast
Awesome.
was like a very, first of all, we were both excited about the idea of a podcast, but I think we've always known that the podcast is a piece of a much bigger
puzzle
mission that we want to go after.
Mhm.
And it's really creating this space, creating this safe community or safe container, or whatever you want to call it, for women to, and very in line with what we've been talking about, to realize that we're not alone in a lot of these emotions that we're feeling, and be able to lift each other up in pursuing the different paths that will bring us joy and a sense of fulfillment and a sense of ownership and freedom in our lives. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like in the future. For now, growing the podcast is our short-term goal, but it's exciting to see the podcast as a piece of a bigger puzzle.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think we got some great
Definitely.
advice when we started the podcast, which I think has become more and more valid as we've gone on. But one of our good friends, Anna, we're actually meeting her for dinner after this. She helps podcasters to grow their content essentially and grow their viewership. And she said to us in the very beginning that the podcast shouldn't be the end all be all. She's like, the podcast is a tool. So what are you pointing people towards? Is it a marketing tool for you where you point them towards Carla's coaching business? What is it going to be in the cog in your wheel, right? So it's not the entire thing, but it's just a piece of it that helps the whole vision to move forward.
Yeah.
And I think it gives it meaning,
It
right?
does.
Because you're not so tied to the metrics, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, even if only one woman listened to it, that is connected to our mission, to what we want to actually impact, versus, 100 people listened. Okay, that's great, but it's very short term, near-term perspective. Yeah.
I love that you say that. Yeah. It's not always about the numbers. It's about having the right people
and the
around.
impact.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much. Before we sign off, though, I have to know, because I've been to Dallas, all right, and I know you're traveling around, Carla, so I want you guys to tell us your favorite meals. We love food. We absolutely love food. Your favorite and drinks. So your favorite restaurant around the Dallas area, as well as one that you've discovered on your travels.
Oh, such a good question. Okay, we were just talking about one.
We were.
I mean, Dallas has a lot of amazing restaurants. And Dallas is not just Dallas. It's the Metroplex. So you got Fort Worth and you got McKinney, you got all these places. So I do have to say the barbecue in Texas. And I have traveled quite a bit. So I just had barbecue in Memphis last weekend.
Okay. We just had this conversation on Monday. So that's interesting that you're bringing this up.
I've had it in Kansas City. I've had it in many different places.
Yep.
I think Texas barbecue is the best barbecue. I have to say. And there is, my husband and I can't wait, because next weekend we're going to our favorite barbecue place. We've sampled many.
Yes.
But our favorite barbecue place is Cooper's in Fort Worth in the Stockyards.
Okay.
So Stockyards, if you've never been to Fort Worth, is where you see real cowboys, on their horses, and they're shepherding or, managing cattle, not shepherding because it's cows, not sheep.
Yeah, herding or whatever.
We really know what we're talking about.
Know, right?
Is it like it almost looks like a warehouse or a garage or something like that?
No, it's an open area. It's streets, but it's like cobblestone or brick streets. So it's very, very cute. And there's a rodeo. and you can buy cowboy hats and boots, and
Ooh,
it's just very
need to go
Texas.
immediately.
Yeah, right now.
You have to go to the stockyards. There's a big honky tonk and place where you can
Oh,
go
we love
listen to
honky tonks.
Nelson.
Honky tonk.
It's like all the Texas stereotypes converged.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like,
but in the best way
real.
possible.
Yeah, it's the real thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'd say
Love that.
is my favorite restaurant, but we're back in my old neighborhood where I used to live when I lived in Dallas. And there is a really awesome place for Vietnamese food that we're going to go to tomorrow night. Faux Crimson.
Ooh.
Really good. But what's your favorite?
I was going to say barbecue too.
Yeah.
That was the first thing that came to mind. And we live a little bit further north. And our favorite is in a town called Plano. So there are really cute downtowns in Texas City. So it's this little like walkable town, and it's called Lockhart's. And so they smoke, they
Yes,
smoke
I agree.
everything there. You can see it, and you buy it by the pound. So they'll give you like a slab of
Wow.
beef. It is,
my
and they serve
gosh.
it in like paper.
Yeah,
So they
just
roll it
brown
up in
paper.
paper, and they're like, here you go. Here's
That's when you
some
know
Like,
it's
bread.
here's
real.
your-
That's the real deal.
Here's your brisket with like sauce.
Oh yeah.
Here's your slab of beef.
gosh.
I was born and raised in Mexico. And so to not say the Mexican food is my real favorite.
Yeah.
Well,
I would
And I'm
be-
sure
I
it's
mean,
amazing over there.
yeah. I mean,
What's your
the first thing
favorite
I thought of
here?
were tacos.
What's my favorite restaurant? Or
Yeah,
Texas
the
food?
Mexican restaurant. here.
Mexican.
Oh, they closed.
They closed.
No, actually, there
Wow.
is one that I do like. And if anybody is in Dallas and is looking for real, authentic Mexican food, recommended by a real Mexican that grew up in Mexico,
Certified.
certified. It's a place on Lemon Avenue called El Tizoncito. And here's what's interesting: El Tizoncito, or Tizon for short, it's a taqueria. So there's tacos and all kinds of delicious things. You see a lot of Mexicans there, which is a really good sign.
It already sounds good.
It's a Mexico City chain. And Noah, my husband, and I were just in Mexico City a few months ago, and we went to the original El Tizoncito.
That's so cool.
I kid you not.
The
That's
Dallas one is
awesome.
better. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Dallas, good job. Mexico City, I'm disappointed.
That is so
Yeah. Oh
And
my
how do you spell
gosh.
that?
Tizoncito.
I would not have gotten that.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask too. I was like, can we get a spelling?
Sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And a food from your travels before we go.
Ooh.
Oh, that is so hard.
And what's the,
Okay.
wait, I have a question. What's the best place you've been to also as a
Oh
sub
man,
question
that is
to
a
that?
hard question.
Have you been to like all the states so far? Or where?
Almost. We've been to like maybe 70%.
Have you
of
been
that.
to
is
Minnesota? Because I'll name
Yes.
5 places and don't
I've
go
been to
anywhere else.
Minnesota, and I've been to an amazing bar right in Minneapolis.
Is it Cowboy
that really
Jack's?
blew my mind. It was, I can't remember the name of it, but it was just amazing. It was like a Japanese vibe. It was awesome.
Ooh.
So we've been to some really interesting places. Skalgard, I think it was called. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Best location is really hard. There's so many. We did spend 3 months in Mexico recently, and we lived in a state called Guanajuato, and it is beautiful. The most famous city there is San Miguel de Allende, which is literally rated the best city in the world. I kid you not, by Travel and Leisure magazine.
It's so beautiful.
It is
Wow.
really beautiful. So that was very special to get to live there. In the US, we've been to a lot of national parks, and my favorite, I think, is Zion in Utah.
Nice. Yes.
But Nashville, we were just in Nashville this past weekend, my husband and I. And Nashville
Love
is
Nashville.
so fun. I love Nashville. And I think that one of my favorite foods on the road is hot chicken in Nashville.
yes.
Like
Hattie
fried
B's. What's it called?
chicken.
Hattie B's hot chicken.
Yes, Hattie B's hot chicken.
Oh, good.
I love
Exactly.
it there.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's a really special city.
I'm a Southern girl at
Yeah,
heart.
she's a Nashville
so
girl.
I just I get excited. I'm in Minnesota. I'm literally almost in Canada, but I'm not from here. I'm from Florida, so it's like
Country music and
Min-
cowboy
hey,
boots.
Minnesota is very beautiful.
It is.
I really do enjoy a lot of parts of Minnesota. Yeah.
and the rock climbing and everything like that. I mean, we're having a lot of fun with golf right now, and
Nice, nice. Yeah, it's very natural.
Outdoors.
There's a lot of lakes, and it just feels very beautiful. There's a great national park that we haven't been to. I think it's called Royal. You probably know this better. Royal something, and it's an island in northern Minnesota, you can only get there by boat.
Really?
Yeah.
National Park.
That's where your dad went, I
Yes.
think, right? Yeah.
My dad?
That's on our list.
Yeah. Didn't he go to a national park in the north?
Oh
somewhere?
yeah, he went to the what do
Really?
they call it? The Boundary Waters, but Voyageurs National Park. I don't know enough
Haven't
about
been there,
Minnesota.
It's on the list.
Away from us. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on the podcast because we actually do have a lot of women listeners and a lot of people from Texas. So whether or not they are women or from Texas, I think people will get a lot out of this because, you know, it just, like I said, it's a weird point in life. I think all the way through, I mean, my mom's like almost 50 now and she's still trying to figure out life, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You never
stop.
really, yeah,
Always
you
a
never really
discovery.
figure it out and you're always learning. And so hopefully people learn something from this because there's resources. Like you said, you're never alone and there's always somebody that can help you. I think that's the biggest takeaway I had.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for having us
Yeah,
on.
this was so fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank
ladies.
you.
And do you guys have an Instagram handle that you want to
do.
pop out there so our listeners can give you a follow?
Yeah. Follow us at Successful the Pod. It was too long to have Successful the Podcast. It's just the pod.
The pod.
Successful the pod. Love
And
it.
our website is successfulthepodcast.com. So you can learn a little bit more about us and find episodes and reach out to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, subscribe,
Awesome.
message them, ask them questions.
Ask questions.
Please
Yes,
do.
big
I
on
always
questions.
want people doing that.
We love questions.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much,
you guys
ladies.
so much. We so appreciate you guys, and maybe we'll be guests on yours one day.
Yeah.
Love that.
Once we get our lives together, we'll
Open.
figure
Yeah.
it out.
Yes.
You know, we're on our own little media journey trying to, I don't know, you know, we're figuring out still. If you want
Part of it
somebody
too,
in the
right?
middle of the journey.
And that's an important story as well.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
that we need to tell. So please, yes, the invitation is wide open.
We'll catch you all next time on Are We Having Fun? Again, go rate and review us. And we'll see y'all next week.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Guys,
Bye.
bye.